freedom of speech comes from the petition rights. The rights of petition come from 1629. The Bill of Rights clearly states that it is your right to petition a monarch, and using commitments against you and prosecuting you for such petitions is illegal. But the system is not being applied as it should be. If it was, you wouldn't see all this, because most people don't know that at high level, so police constables get £500,000 cash in their back pocket, untaxable, when they retire as a cash lump sum, and then 270 grand a year. And then as you go down the ranks, it only reduces fractionally. A police constable now gets anywhere between 90 and 130 grand cash in their back pocket, untaxable, when they retire. And then they get a 2/3 pension. And you're wondering why those police officers stick together. They will protect the state. Palestine. I said, I don't support Palestine or Israel. I support the children. I support the normal, everyday victims of war. What is going on is unlawful, illegal. It is a genocide against the children. And what
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
When tyranny becomes law, rebellion becomes a duty. So said Thomas Jefferson. Go to bit.ly/lawful tax protest or bit.ly/make war history and find out why it is a criminal offence to pay central government or local government taxes in the UK. Hi, I am joined by the leader of the English Constitution Party, and we're going to be talking about the English Constitution because we actually do have one. And most people aren't aware of it, but we need to get aware of our rights so that we can fight against the tyranny that's coming our way. Hey, Graham, thank you so much for making yourself available.
That's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
You're so welcome. So welcome. And I just want to start by just thanking you because you reposted a tweet of mine on X, which was all about how, according to the International Criminal Court Act 2001 and the Terrorism Act 2000, it's illegal for us to fund in any way, provide money to any agency, directly or indirectly, that is supporting, funding, facilitating genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and acts of terrorism. And that includes providing the British government with any money in any way, including taxes, because the British government is breaking its own laws. And if people want to find out more, they can go to bit.ly/make-war-history. bit.ly/make-war-history. Anyway, I just wanted to get that little plug in, Graham, right? So thank you, because you said...
And what you just said there, there's a number of reasons constitutionally why council tax is unlawful. There's things that people are doing in the background that I completely disagree with, and they are making themselves making themselves vulnerable to prosecution, losing property, their livelihoods, etc., because of what they're actually doing. Right? What you described in that tweet is one of the legitimate ways of saying I'm not paying council tax, right? So I just want to make sure I emphasise that. That's why I retweeted it. It is one of the legitimate ways of not paying council tax. The second thing to understand for everyone, constitutionally, the Local Finance Act that they actually brought through Parliament was unconstitutionally enacted because they removed royal assent from it. That is unconstitutional. That means that council tax, in effect, is unlawful because what gave it authority is unlawful. And therefore, the initial act should be made null and void. Constitutionally, what I'm telling you is absolutely right. You will not hear that from any British barrister, British lawyer, British politician, but I am telling you that is fact. And
one, I believe you, because you and I had a long conversation about our constitutional statutes, because my understanding, and we can go into the English Constitution and the Constitution Party, is that Parliament are representatives of the people. Parliament have to pass laws that the monarch has to check that they're not to the prejudice of the people, and if they're not to the prejudice of the people, then the monarch signs them off and gives assent, and then the bill becomes an act when it gets signed off.
There's roughly, and there's probably more, about 100 bills, and it was the Labour Party via the Fabians that created a special section that removed royal assent. Right, that's unlawful, unconstitutional, not allowed to happen, and people need to understand where it's coming from. By the way, this piece of information was presented to me by another constitutionalist. who reads law. So we have a whole team of people. I'm just a mouthpiece, just to make sure everyone understands that. The reason they won't listen to me, and no one will listen to me in the British state, is because I am working class, right, and a lay person. Well, in the old days, in England of old, I would have been known as a common lawyer. And just to make sure everyone understands this, them people did exist. I exist, right, as a common lawyer. And people need to understand that a common lawyer meant, and there was a phrase used in Hansard once during a debate, where they said every Englishman is a common lawyer. And the reason they said that was because every Englishman knew his rights. And they could stand up in any court of law and say that is against the Bill of Rights. Exactly what happens in America now today, because we anglicised America. They did not Americanise us, right? And the system in America is actually English. The construct, the Constitution, even their the way in which they divide up the states, right, is English. They are independent, and that's how we used to be in England.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So the English Constitution Party, in a nutshell, what does it stand for? When did you set it up? Why is it?
I like that. In a nutshell, what does it stand for? It couldn't be more simple, right? Our manifesto. We are unique, by the way, and I had to threaten to sue the Electoral Commission and actually engage with their chief counsel, right? Because they wouldn't register us because of our actual manifesto, believe it or not, and our constitution. They didn't approve being British, right? And then they allowed us to register. So our manifesto, and this is what people really need to understand, our manifesto is the English Constitution. We are a political party that actually has set up exactly in law of where if you stand for the English Constitution Party as a member of Parliament, to be a member of Parliament, the manifesto of our party is the English Constitution. And what people don't realise is member of Parliaments are not supposed to be standing for political parties. They represent the constituents and they represent their rights and protect their rights. That's the whole point of a member of Parliament, right? So we've actually put that on a tin, designed it legally, and said, well, how does this political party constitute an independent, right? Because that's what you're supposed to be, really, independent, right? And what we did was we created that in law, and then presented it as our manifesto, and the British didn't want to register us. They knew exactly what we was and what we was about, and they went, oh, we don't like this, and tried to stop us. And then I said, if you want to end up in the High Court as the Electoral Commission, and a judge looks at this constitutionally, I think you'll find we'll win, hands down. And they come back and said, we'll register, and they did.
Well, the idea that the Electoral Commission gets to say on what platform any group of people can constitute a party is like, no. If we're an authentic democracy, people can get together with any platform if they want.
Correct. And people don't realise how much influence the Electoral Commission, which is part of the what I call the Soviet system. The British system is the Soviet system. So the British were the ones who installed communism in the Soviet Union, and by the way, also in China. So once people understand that, it's complex. You'd have to go through the history of it, but once you show it, people go, "Wow, I never knew that." So,
well, great. Just on that, I recently recorded an interview with Richard Poe, the author of "How the British Invented Communism and Blamed the Jews." It was a really good history book for people like me who don't like history.
Yeah.
Easy.
So again, I really enjoyed that. I actually saw that. So there's some elements to what he says I disagree with.
Sure.
Right, because we have debates on things. But the actual implementation of communism and where it come from. Communism doesn't. It originates, believe it or not, from the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was communist, but they didn't call it communist. No one, and that term hadn't been invented. But the actual what they designed in the Roman times, and that means that you had the people at the top, you had the people in the middle, which were basically plebeians, right? And then you had the patriots at the top, the plebeians, and then you had the slaves. right? So what we are as working class people technically are slaves under that system, right? They but one of the things I disagree with that was to say that then we blame the Jews. The Jews have got a lot to do with this. People need to stop this nonsense. There is a Jewish cabal, right? I'm not in. I call it the Jewish mafia, right? I'm not suggesting in any way that every Jew is of that class, and to say that is you're not very intelligent if you do say that, in my opinion, especially if you know me, right? You can talk about the Russian mafia, you can talk about the American mafia, you can talk about the Sicilian mafia, every mafia out there. The only mafia you can't talk about is the Jewish mafia, and they have been there a lot longer than all the other mafias. They are organised crime syndicate. They have a number of things that they do in their past, which is constant, which is economic, right, in nature. They know exactly what they're doing. So when that particular person said, the British created communism and blamed it on the Jews, that's nonsense. We didn't blame it on the Jews. The Jews are part of that system, and they was part of the Roman system, right? And once people get that, and again, I'm not having a go at every single Jew out there, right? Sure. All I'm saying is you need to be honest, and if you're not honest, this system will carry on, and it will carry on destroying people.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, you're not saying that all Jews or whatever, but there is this, I suppose, this shady business element within the community that you're saying has been running things in the background, and we don't know about it. And one of the things that points to it, I suppose, is you know who's running the show when you're not allowed to criticize them.
Correct.
If they're above criticism and you get condemned for it, it's like, well, why is that? Because the truth doesn't need protection.
Absolutely, what you're saying is absolutely right. And just think about this, people. Some countries, many countries now around the world, if you criticise this group of people, you get sent to prison. There is no more powerful mafia than that.
Yeah.
Right? So, and people,
no criticism.
That's it. You need the only people in the world that don't accept criticism are. They're called dark personality, right? And there's 4 sets of people under that group of people, right? Psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellians, and sadists. They've all got the same attributes, traits, and tactics, right? As a group of people, they operate very similarly. But people need to understand one group of people that do not, in any way, accept criticism, right? Including, setting up laws. So if you criticise us, we'll send you to prison, right? Literally narcissistic. So what I say is they are narcissistic in nature. And by the way, that group of people can exist in many. So not just atheists can be narcissistic. Muslims can be narcissistic.
It's a human trait.
Yeah. So there's a whole different story, and it's an interesting one. But I mean, coming back to the Constitution in England. So that's what we did. We set up as an English Constitution party, and our manifesto is the English Constitution. There's no such thing as a British Constitution. There never has been. The Acts of Union was a political union that created a political union. It never created a country. The unification of the crowns happened in 1603, and it was not political. It was absolutely not political. So people then understand. Once you understand,
what was the document or the bill in 1603 that unified Scotland, England, and Wales?
It wasn't a bill as such. It was a coming together of the actual crown, and there may have been bills associated with it, but it wasn't like the Acts of Union. The Acts of Union was specific in what it was doing. And by the way, people constitutionally don't understand what the Acts of Union was. First of all, it was
hold on a second. So one is you know this so well, so inside out, and so naturally, and so. I mean, we could end up talking for hours and hours and hours, and it'd be fascinating going over there, going into this one, right? But this is really for people. I want to break it down so it's simple for people who are new to this, right? So here's my understanding. The English Constitution, you got the 1297 Magna Carta. There was a later Magna Carta, forgive me because I don't know the date, right? Then there was the 1688 or 1689 Bill of Rights, which installed William and Mary as the monarchs of England because King James had been a tyrant. The Scottish King James had been a tyrant for the English, and the English said, no. And the Bill of Rights says various rights that English people have that cannot be changed by Parliament and that are there for perpetuity. And Parliament, it set up Parliament as the representatives of the people. Then you had the Coronation Oath a couple of years later, or
no, so the Coronation Act was part of the same era, and what you're describing, and it's funny that you say you could listen for hours. When I do constitutional seminars all over the country, right? And people say, "How long do you need?" And I said, "Well, how long do you want for 1100 years worth of law, right?" And then they go to me, and the thing is, they're never the same, because I don't do scripted and I don't do slides, right?
Sure.
What I do is I walk through the law, and then I engage with the audience. If I see what level, what you've just said there is bang on, right? So if these are new people and they don't know anything about you at all, and they're like sitting there going, "What is this? I've always been told." So I'll start from the beginning, right? I've always been told we haven't got a constitution. And I say, well, if we haven't got a constitution, right, why do we live in a constitutional monarchy? What created a constitutional monarchy, right? And what is it? And by the way, people, it's not a constitutional democracy. It's a constitutional monarchy. It's a completely different thing. The same in the United States of America, right? It's a constitutional republic, not a constitutional democracy.
Yeah.
You can't. The two things are incompatible, right? And there's a reason for it, right? So getting back to that, so the monarchy was created over time. There is a saying.
I'm sorry, Graham. Hold on a second, right? So because there's a couple of other constitutional acts, the Coronation Oath Act, and then the Act of Settlement, 1700, which
even more important. Well, so some people say that the Act of Settlement is more important than the Bill of Rights. I would say they are equal. They complement each other, and they actually say that in their long title and in what's known as a preamble. A preamble. So for people who don't understand what a law looks like, at the top it'll have the short title. The short title is basically a very quick description of what it is, right? Very quick, right? And then underneath that, normally it has the long title. The long title is more descriptive, right, of what it is. And then underneath that, they have something called a preamble. And the preamble is what, if people have heard of the spirit of the law, the preamble is telling people what it is we're setting out to achieve by constructing this law. So if it isn't written, right, in the law, and our laws forbid rather than to allow, right? So it's crucially important to understand the difference, because then you understand where your freedom comes from, right? Yeah. We have the reverse system of the European Union. They have an administrative law system which it's only lawful if it's written. If it's not, that's why there's like 40,000 words describing a cucumber, right? Because the way that because if it isn't written of the description of that cucumber, you look at a cucumber and it's not in that 40,000 words. A little kink in it is not in that 40,000 words, right? Then it's not a cucumber. Whereas the English is the opposite. It says this is a cucumber, right? Yeah, that's it, right? Everything else is down to it's simple law, right? Yeah.
Graham, just on that, forgive me, just on that. If it's that something you said just clicked, right? Like bing, this bell went, which is that if the laws is designed around forbidding stuff, that means everything that isn't forbidden is allowed, and therefore, well, where's the allowance comes from? Well, that comes from natural law.
Correct.
We do naturally.
Correct. And the difference is that's a common law system, which is we are a common law jurisdiction, right? So when you there are many other instances where you could explain that, right? One of them is Sharia, right? Because it's an administrative law system with the hadiths, with the Quran. It's forbidden under the English system, right? I mean in the Bill of Rights, right? It is forbidden. So because we don't tolerate any form of religious construction or of the law. So and that means Christians as well, by the way. So the Synod couldn't make a law in this country. The Church of England cannot make a law in this country and then enforce it on us and then send us to prison. That is forbidden, right, by the English Bill of Rights. And so is every other religion forbidden from doing that. to anyone who lives on our shore or is on our shores, right? So it's not discriminatory. It's actually saying this type of event ain't happening in England anymore because it used to.
It used to, because the Catholics were ruling over the Protestants, enforcing
Yeah.
their ways, and the Bill of Rights was like, no, we're going to do what we want to do. You're going to leave us free. You can't enforce that, right? So then you were saying that the Act of Union is, you consider that it's on a par with the Bill of Rights.
No, not the Act of Union. The Act,
Act of Settlement.
It is on par because it sets out. It actually says in its long title, furthering the rights and liberties of the subject, right? And in addition to the English Bill of Rights is what it was, and it was actually constructed by the same people. And when I say the same people, I mean Lord John Somers, who was the great. Was the keeper of the Great Seal of England. He was the Attorney General, Solicitor General. He was the chief architect and legal scholar, along with Sir John Holt, again, who became the Lord Chief Justice at the Convention period, or the Glorious Revolution, that persuaded Parliament that this is what we need to do during a Convention Parliament. And it's really important that people understand the English Bill of, everyone talks about the European Convention on Human Rights. The second word, convention, is very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the English Bill of Rights came from a convention, right? It was a convention era, a convention parliament, right? There was a special sequence of events that made it a convention parliament. So the English Bill of Rights is convention rights. And they're English rights, they're inalienable rights. The difference between the European Convention of Human Rights and the English Bill of Rights is the English Bill of Rights are, very important legal word, inalienable. You cannot take them away. They are natural God-given rights, right? Whereas the European Convention for Human Rights, most or the majority of them rights, I will say, right, are what's known as qualifiable. That and qualifiable for various reasons. So who is the person that makes them qualifiable? The government, because if the government says, under the European Convention for Human Rights, if they were to create a national emergency, right, they can remove your rights under them conditions. The English Bill of Rights doesn't do that. It says you have these rights, they're God-given rights, don't matter what the emergency was, you've still got these rights, right? And that's a major difference. But so what rights do you prefer? Right, the English Bill of Rights and inalienable rights or qualifiable rights, where the government at will, right, can create an emergency, any emergency, right, even invent one, right, like it's raining, right?
Yeah, like lockdown,
like lockdowns. But so the point being, and that's what we're trying to tell people: you are being conned, right? Because the greatest rights that you have belong to an Englishman, right? And by the way, just to make sure everybody listening to this understands, right? Nowhere in the English Constitution, right, does it mention race. In fact, it was the English, not the British, that freed the slaves, right? So because we was once slaves. So once you understand it was the English that did that, right? And it was our legal system and our common law that freed the slaves, right? The English. And it was actually a white working class Englishman that funded and presented the case. Well, one of the cases, but it's probably the most important case, which was Stuart versus Somerset, 1762, right? And then when you actually get the history of it, you're like, so it wasn't the British that stopped slavery. And you go, no. In fact, the British wanted to carry on, right? Because Wilberforce, believe it or not, it took him 20 consecutive years, right, of continually putting in the Abolition Act before it actually got passed. So Wilberforce was a great guy. I'm not saying he was with us, right? I class him as a great Englishman, right? But what they're not telling you is the British Parliament, right, kept striking down the bill because they wanted to carry on with slavery, right? Yeah. And the English have already said it's forbidden under the common law, right? And that's why blacks started coming from America and coming here on boats and whatever, because they knew if they got to England, they were free, right? Yeah. And it was the white working class, particularly a guy called Granville Sharp from Durham, who was a tailor, made suits, cut cloth, right? So he was a tradesman, right? As opposed to, he wasn't in a higher profession. He was a working class person. And it was him that did that.
Right. Okay. Okay. I don't want to go into this too much detail, right? But I just want to say, so one of the things for me, because I wasn't born here, right? Uh, and I looked on your website, and when we've spoken privately, and I've heard some of your talks and everything, your podcasts, you're really, really clear and specific that this is racism is forbidden. We are not a racist party because there is this association. Certainly for me, growing up in London in the '70s, National Front, and then the English Defence League, and all that business, right? But what you're talking about is humanity and a return to the English Constitution for all people that are legally here. And that could be those that are born here legally, and that could be those that, like myself, have been naturalized, gone through a vetting process legally, and
Yeah.
a return to constitutional law.
Yeah. No. So the biggest thing for me, um, there are elements strictly to the English Constitution, right? So for example, if you're not born of English parents, right, you can't be a member of Parliament, and you this is under constitutional law, and you cannot have any position or power or authority over me, right? That's the English Constitution. It was put in place to stop our culture and England being destroyed
By the French, I expect.
mainly by the French, but also by the Catholics. But the point is, it was put there for a reason, right? And that was transferred to America. It's one of the reasons why you cannot be the president of America unless you are natural born, right? But they've got natural born, but they haven't included the heritage part, and the heritage part is important, right? There are various reasons for it, and it's nothing to do with race, like you just said. This is mainly about Europeans and technically about religion. It was the Catholics, the Jesuits, and other. But the whole point is, it was there for a reason, right? And it was historical reason. It was nothing to do with race. It wasn't the colour of your skin, right? So if you was technically, if you was a black person and you had many generations, right, and living in England, there's nothing really stopping you. But therefore, which is why I always say, I don't get annoyed with ethno nationalists. I think they've got a point, to be honest with you, and I listen to them. I'll listen to anyone, right? Because without debate, you can never solve the problem.
Absolutely.
So you have to talk to people, and you have to understand why they're angry and why the ethno nationalists are so angry. And I do get it, 100% get it, right? People need to understand the Constitution. So there's a lot of people out there that only talk about the Magna Carta. First of all, it's not called the Magna Carta. It's called the Great Charter for a reason. It's in 1215. Because there's a number of Magna Cartas, right? So people need to understand that when that was created, it was an extension of something else called the Charter of Liberties and many other charters. And then people, a group of people, I'm not going to say who they are on this show, but they're complete numbnuts, right? They don't understand the law. Let me put it this way: Joseph Stalin would have described this group of people as useful idiots, right? Because that's what they are, right?
Okay. And let's stay with the Constitution. So let's go back, right?
So what I'm saying is, our Constitution isn't just about the Magna Carta. It's about before it, what was after it, and it come all the way along. There are a number, so Parliament cannot and never could repeal the Magna Carta 1215. Why not? Because it's out of its jurisdiction. Why is it out of its jurisdiction? Because Parliament didn't exist, right, in 1215. Parliament didn't come about until 1275 with the first statute of Westminster, by the way. And by the way, it was the English it was the first law ever that said you can't rape a woman, right? It's against the law, right? So there's lots of things that the English did that are really positive towards women and women's rights, right? So there was a whole process of law that right up until the point that we're at now, right? Where different laws have been acted, but there was a difference between some of these laws. Some of these laws, as Sir John Law says in the Metric Martyrs case, which is a famous constitutional case, where he set out there is a hierarchy of law. There's also a hierarchy of parliaments. A convention parliament is a higher type of parliament, ranking parliament than an ordinary parliament, and constitutional laws, right, whether they are enacted by a convention. So you've got belt and braces if it's a convention act or bill, right? And constitutional, which is what the Bill of Rights is. And there's a whole process with that, but we'll jump forward to that in a couple of seconds. An ordinary parliament, therefore, cannot repeal, touch, undo, do anything to a convention, a convention statute, right? Which is what we're talking about. So if you go all the way forward to this period in time, and I'm skipping up.
Before we do that, I'm just making notes here. I want to make sure I've got them right. So the 1215 Great Charter, the Bill of Rights 1689, the Act of Settlement, which I think was 1700.
The 1701. Yeah.
1701, which was about
1700, but it came into effect in 1701.
Right. The Coronation Act, which was about the same time, and the Act of Union. Is that a constitutional act?
Right. So we'll get to that, because the Acts of Union is really important because whilst it is.
Before we get to that, Graham, are there any others that I've messed up?
There's loads of them. There's about 15 in total. What I normally do is have all my banners up and then I go for each one. But one of them that is the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act. Is crucially important, and people need to understand. There's other ones that go back to 1368, which is the observance of due process, right? Which is where you get, if anything happens in a court of law and they go out of process for it, it's null and void, and therefore the case is thrown out. It's where this comes from, right? So that's when I talk about the law. I then say, so if this happens to you in a court of law and they've done something that's completely out of process, they're not allowed to do it, it's an abusive process, the judge then says, I'm ceasing the case, I'm throwing it out. Where we get the authority to do that from is observance of due process, right?
Okay, now has that been repealed? Have any of these been repealed?
No, you can't.
They're still in effect.
Sorry? Yeah, they're still in effect. And that's where we get constitutional law from. So, again, if you go through the Howard Statutes, volume 10, which I've got, is constitutional law. It's about that thick. And then it shows all the constitutional statutes, and then it describes the workings of the Constitution. But getting back to the Glorious Revolution, so we've skipped over Cromwell. Cromwell is important, very important, right? And the British don't want to talk about it because we was a republic, right? For a 12-year period. So, and by the way, we had a written codified constitution from Cromwell. Actually, it was John Lambert, but. And again, I think it was Article 38 that actually says if you create any law that goes against the rights and liberties of an Englishman, it's null and void. So even Cromwell gave that to us, right? So again, we've skipped over that part of history. Not that I want to, because I do talk about it, but the bit that we really want to talk about is the Glorious Revolution, and it come obviously after a civil war period, right? There were three elements to it that are really important, and people don't know that. The first is the Declaration of Reasons. That's where the Prince of Orange, when he landed in Brixton, Devon, read out why he was here. And he didn't invade anyway, he was invited. 3,000 of our troops was with him. They exiled themselves to Holland, right, and then come across on the ships. So everyone says we was invaded. We wasn't. It was an invitation. And there was a specific reason for the invitation, that we was being overrun and terrorised and tortured and persecuted by Catholics, right? Mainly there was a lot to do with the Jesuits, right? So the Declaration of Reasons is crucially important, and then you had something called the Declaration of Rights. Why is the Declaration of Rights so important? Because it's the original contract. That's what it's termed as in law. It's crucially important. We wouldn't have a monarchy without that document, right? And it was a negotiation. It's what's known as private law. There are 27 heads of terms, and private law means they're your tort rights, if you want to understand it like that. And one of them rights, by the way, is the right to keep and bear arms for self-defence as a Protestant. That is law. It's still law. Can't be reversed, right? And there is no such law in this country that says that you cannot use a weapon in self-defence. In fact, the law actually says the reverse. You can use a weapon in self-defence, and it's where police get their rights to carry batons, gas, and everything. What shouldn't happen is unlawful, is us being defenceless. The government are not allowed to infringe that right. But people don't know. That's the whole point, right? So the secondary element of that, or the next element. So from the Declaration of Rights, which is private right, and I want people to remember this term, it is crucially important, right? Everyone's heard of personal injury, right? And these group of lawyers out there, right? So, oh, go on, let's sue this person, let's sue that person, personal injury, right? Forget personal injury, right? Private right injury. Declaration of Rights. It's fundamental to the legal system of this country, and every single person should be using it. If you want to create and really create a system where your rights are being protected, hit them in the pocket, right? It's called private right injury. So that means you don't have to have a physical injury with your finger or you fall over, you hit your head and all these other things. If the state or a state official or any other, even a corporation, goes against, right, your private rights as set out in the Declaration of Rights, you have a case against them. And the problem is they don't train solicitors and lawyers anymore in private right injury, and they should, right?
Oh.
I mean, massively. So if there's a couple of cases out there, Huckle versus Money, for example, a guy was banged up. This is in the 1700s. He was banged up wrongly, right, locked up. He weren't even in there for long. For 24 hours. He was fed steak and owl by the jailers because they knew he hadn't done anything wrong, right? When he sued, the jury awarded him £300 because it went against the Magna Carta and it went against his rights, right? And it went against the Bill of Rights, etc. And the judge actually said that. But what's going through the jury's mind? Because it's the jury's rights. They're the ones who control how much they pay out because it's their rights. So if the state was to offend against it, that's what's happening. So we've currently got a case in the High Court dealing with this issue, right? Charlie Staples, where and it will be for torture. So, and that was during lockdown. So everyone needs to understand that. I mean, if you was on a full English show on Rumble, you would see what we're doing with that case. But a major point for everyone to remember is you have these rights. The next thing in line, still in that era, is the Bill of Rights. What was the Bill of Rights and why is it so important? So if you can understand that the Declaration of Rights is your private rights, right? So in tort, etc., civil law. Mm-hmm. The Bill of Rights is what's known as public law, right? It is a criminal injunction. That's the way to term it. It's a criminal injunction against anyone and everyone, including the state, that because it is being created as a statute, it is now public law, right? And the reason why it's a criminal injunction is because Parliament is a court in its own right. That's why the Sergeant at Arms in Parliament can lock you in the tower if you don't do what you're told, right? And people don't realise, and by the way, that still exists to this day. They will lock you in the tower because it is a court in its own right. And what people need to understand about the Bill of Rights in all these various elements is if you, as a state individual or another individual, even if you're running a corporation, right, go against the English Bill of Rights in particular, because we're talking about rights, you are in contempt of statute, right, which is common law criminal offence, and you are in contempt of sovereign, right? Because it is the sovereign that enacts the law, not Parliament. Right? It's not. That's why they call it the Crown in Parliament, because of the ministers and the process, etc. Right? And the monarch's peers sit in the Lords. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you understand that if you go against the Bill of Rights, you're actually committing a criminal offence. It is a criminal offence. The Bill of Rights is a criminal injunction that says. This is what's forbidden. Remember when we started the show? This is what's forbidden, but you can do everything else. So you can do everything else, but do not offend against any of these 13 things. So in the bill, so the Declaration of Rights had 27 heads of terms, right? And rights and wrongs and the debates of the time is all in there if you know the full history of it, which I do, and it's fascinating, to be honest with you. And then the Bill of Rights is the criminal injunction part. So you've got public law and private law. And then once people understand that, so the bit that makes me laugh is people don't realise, don't matter what colour your skin, belt and braces, right, you have got protection in tort and in criminal law against the state.
Okay, so against the state, and what a loving, caring state we have under Keir Starmer currently. So just some of the acts that are going to be enacted or about to be enacted or whatever, or have been enacted, you know, that I'll just rattle through a few and then you give me a general answer to them, right? So, if you don't register your chickens with the government, you can face a £1,500 fine or a 6-month in prison, 6 months for not telling the government you got chickens in prison. The climate and nature bill that's going through right now.
So rather than give you a verbal answer, would you want me to give you, as you go through them, I'll give you an answer, a constitutional answer.
Yeah, so the climate and nature bill that's going through Parliament today. Yes, agreed, right? Which will give governments the government the right to commandeer and compulsory purchase people's property and force them to move into cities.
Yeah.
Plus a whole lot more.
In history, this has all happened before with the Enclosures Act, right? It's the same thing happening again. People, because they don't understand their history and particularly their legal history, right? And once you understand it, you know that this is a communist takeover, a full Comanche communist takeover. And just to make sure everyone understands this, there is a guy, and I just want you to know this. His name was Eccles. He co-wrote with Karl Marx the Communist Manifesto. Eccles wrote Engels. Sorry, yes. I'll call him Eccles because it's probably easier for me to remember. But Engels, right? So what happens? He writes to his friend, and he says in this letter that every communist revolution has been shipwrecked on the rock of England. That's why England is targeted, because of our common law jurisdiction and the way that our common law works. It protects against communism. By the way, it also equally protects against fascism, because we as the English don't do either. We're not interested. Right? We don't have or accept authoritarian rule in England. Never have done. We will always rise up and rebel against it. And now they're pushing the English now to a point where we ain't tolerating any of it. And it is going to happen. I mean, you're heading towards a civil war, in my opinion, right? But getting back to what you're talking about there, and especially with the property rights, that started a long time ago, even with the copyhold. So you've seen what's just gone on with the farmers. What the farmers don't realise is many of the air rights that they have come from what's known as copyhold. Copyhold was an ancient right in England, and it was abolished by the British again, right? So people don't realise there's a big difference between the British and the English, right? Massive difference. The British abolished copyhold in 1925, I think it was, right? But they didn't abolish it, because you can never abolish. If you had said on that bill, all of the air rights of copyholders are being abolished, right? Which is basically what's happened, right? Then the bill would never have passed, because no landowner would have passed it, and the many landowners was in Parliament, they would never have passed it. Right, because you're handing your property rights to the state. So people need to understand that means that there is deception and deceit, because they knew what they was doing. Right? Yeah. And under the English common law, any form of fraud vitiates consent. Right. Yeah. So there is no consent because you've lied to the people. And people don't realise it is our legal system that protects you. And what they've done through the slow march through the institutions, which is basically academia. They took control of academia first, and then removed from academia, and then from the curriculum, your knowledge of your rights and all of this history. Right? And they did that in the early 1970s, by the way. And the reason they did that was because we went into the European Union completely unconstitutionally and unlawfully. It was the European Communities Act of 1972 was ultra-vires. Right, so when people like me know that, and they didn't expect someone of my age, right, to still understand the Constitution in the way that a 90-year-old or a 100-year-old person would have understood the Constitution, and one of the reasons for that is if you have a look at my books, I mean, this is just one, a history of England. I mean, this one's over 100 years old, right? I've got books here. Go to the archives and we've got history going back 1100 years where you can actually read what the ancestor writ, and you go, ooh, that's what they meant by that, right? They don't like it. They don't like truth, because communism completely believes that all of them that was wrong and we're right, and this is what we're going to do, and we want a complete system that we control.
It's a form of feudalism that's coming our way, right? Now, yeah. You said that the act of the European Union Act, the Community Act, was ultra-virus, i.e. the government was going beyond its powers. What was it? How was it ultra-virus?
Because it goes against the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights forbids anyone having any authority over us in any way whatsoever, religiously, anything. You cannot have any control over us.
But then, Graham, why are they getting away with it? Because there's been all this erosion.
People don't know their rights. So the reason why they hate me, the reason why they ban me on YouTube, they ban me on Twitter, they ban me on, even recently on Twitter, which I was really shocked about. They've banned me on Facebook years ago, right? They took down my PayPal account. I mean, when there was a particular legal case, and we raised £250,000 to take the government to court, right? Two senior judges, retired judges, had read through our case and said it's highly arguable what you've written, right? It gets into court and they say totally without merit. Bang, right? And then totally without merit, bang. When other judges have said, retired judges have said it's highly arguable, right? It then turns out that the judges dealing with our case were fellows of the European Union, right? And again, we made complaints and said there's obvious bias. If they're fellows of the European Union, right, and the legal system of the European Union, and they're sitting in our High Court judging our cases when we're saying this is unlawful, there's obvious bias, right? So again, people don't realise, one, how crooked the system is, how crooked the judges are, right? The judges are more corrupt than the average working class criminal out there, right? They are the highest level of criminal, right? And the reason I say that is because treason and perjuring your oath is the highest level of criminality, and that's what they're doing. But right. When you get people like me, I mean, again, if you go for the people don't know, and then I'll go around the country teaching them. We have all the banners out. If you go, like I say, if you go to the Full English show on Rumble, the only channel, or the only platform, I should say, that the British, by the way, tried to shut down, right, is Rumble. And in Rumble moved from Canada to Florida. Chris, who runs it, Pulaski, I think his name is, right? And again, someone else out in America called Devin Nunes. So get yourself onto Rumble. Right, Rumble's not. You're not going to be taken down on Rumble, right? Bang, on Rumble. Now I can say things. I have to be careful on this because of where you're going to be putting it up. But I say things on there that make people, and on my seminars, I say to people, I am going to make you feel uncomfortable because I'm going to tell you the truth, right? And just because you've been brainwashed to believe X doesn't mean X is true, right? And when I tell you the truth and show you the evidence of it, you'll all be sitting there going, oh, right? Because you'll understand what's been done here. Well, the same process happened in the Soviet Union. There was many people that knew it was seriously wrong, but just to make sure people are aware of this, even today, the Soviet Union no longer exists, right? Yeah. It was artificial, it was a legal fiction. Joseph Stalin was the one who created Soviet, right, as a term, to crush all the other identities, including Russian, right? People need to understand that that whole system was created by the British. And British nationality only existed from 1947 and 1981. Who is one of the persons who helped create that, right? Well, one Joseph Stalin in the USSR created Soviet. Who was the one who done it here? Margaret Thatcher. Yet they think that Margaret Thatcher is some sort of some hero, working class hero. She isn't, right? And just to make sure everyone's aware, all of the political parties, right, are bad. It's a bit like when you talk about the war and you say, oh, you're Churchill, great leader. No, he was bad, right? So was Stalin. All of the political leaders at the time were all bad. The war didn't have to happen, right? That means that they have their own agendas. And the same thing exists today. The same principles, except the only people who are stepping up to the plate are Putin, right? Putin's not a communist. You can call him a lot of things, but he ain't a communist, so I can tell you that, right? He's an Orthodox Christian. So just getting back to our laws and our legal system, right? So where are the two things where Islam and Orthodox Christian align completely, right? Neither of us allow usury. Yep. Right? In other words, interest.
Now hold on, because I want to go back to the statutes and the law and everything, right? Because one of the things I've heard is that juries can find a guilty person innocent, even if someone admits to it. Yeah, I did it. They can still find them innocent, but they can also annul parliamentary legislation.
Correct. So
How does that work?
what you're talking about. So let me really briefly run through it. There's a separation of powers under English law. The
Yeah.
separation of powers is Parliament, the Crown, and the judiciary. They're the separation of powers, right?
Yeah.
Technically, the English Bill of Rights is a trust document, right? I won't go into the detail, but it is, because there's beneficiaries and there's trustees, etc. Right? So 1, 2, 3. That's the power of separation. But there's a fourth one, and the fourth one is the jury, right? Because when all else fails, if you get in front of a jury literally takes an oath to decide fact and law in its own conscience, right? So individuals, right? And it used to be the case you couldn't have it had to be a majority verdict, right?
Right.
And they've again altered our constitutional juries to such an extent that they are going to get rid of them. And I'll get back onto that in a second, right? I'll show you the attack on juries. So if you are a defendant and you plead not guilty, the judge is the one who really deals with the law, right? He's not allowed to deal with the fact. The jury is the only group of people that can deal with fact, right? That's the way the law works. But under our legal system, the jury can also decide the law and the fact, right? And if you ticked all the boxes, so you said something at the beginning which was completely is not right. If you stand up in court and say I am guilty, but I want to put it to a jury, you've just plead guilty, you're going down, and the only person dealing with that is the judge, right? Yeah. So it is not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, and you present your case to the jury. Even if in law you've ticked all the boxes that you've committed the offence, you explain the situation to the jury, right? Not to the judge, to the jury, and you say this. If they decide in your circumstances they would have done the same, right? They can find you not guilty. And even if one of them people finds you not guilty, you're not guilty, because it's beyond reasonable doubt. It's not beyond reasonable doubt if you go for a majority decision, right? This isn't the democratic decision is of all of the jurors. If they find you guilty, you're gone, right? So a not guilty verdict cannot be appealed by the state or anyone else, right? So that means once you come out with a not guilty as the juryman, right, or women, you're found not guilty. They can nullify the King's law. So in other words, the monarch's law. They can nullify the common law, which is the highest law in the land, and they can nullify statute, but only in individual cases.
Right.
So it's really important. That's why they say every case rests on its own merits.
Right.
But that's where that term comes from, right? Because everyone's got different circumstances. I'll give you an example of that. So we used to have something called grand juries, right? It's where America gets its grand juries from, is from England, and they abolished them in the 1920s. And the reason they did that was because it was a way of us holding to account the state or state officials for corruption. So they abolished it, right? People didn't realise what they was doing. It's really important to understand what a grand jury does. A grand jury, basically, it isn't a trial in terms of guilt or innocence. It's about whether there is probable cause. So you're actually putting the evidence to a jury and saying, we have this evidence that someone is corrupt, or they've done this, or they've done that, right? And then the jury decides if there is probable cause to issue a warrant for their arrest and trial, right? So that's where the indictment comes from. There's something else called a presentation as well, but the indictment is a grand jury indictment. We had that in England, and the British removed it, right? Because the British is a corrupt system, and they've removed it from the system, which means one of our processes. Now, they intend to remove juries full stop and go to a full-on administrative law trial by tribunal, which is the European system, and that's not the English way, right? So just to make sure everyone's aware of that, the new Lady Justice is talking about abolishing juries. Right, so it's not. And just to make sure everyone's aware of this, let's go back to if you go in front of a jury and you've defended yourself with a weapon and they're charging you for whatever they're charging you with, having an offensive weapon in a public place or whatever the nonsense they come out with, right? And you say to a jury, the English Bill of Rights says this, right, that I can have a weapon in my self-defence as long as I'm a Protestant, blah, 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 right, as allowed by law. And that means for self-defence. So when you read the declaration, you understand what they meant by it, right? So again, the judges are lying to you, the people are lying to you, the state is lying to you. They all know what it means, right? Or they did know what it meant. My point to you is there was a particular case during the 1980s riots, right? And a guy who was defending his shop from rioters. The only way, because the police was gone. I mean, the place was completely lawless, right? Mm-hmm. So he made petrol bombs, right? And he was saying to the rioters, "You come near me, I'm literally going to torch you, right? So torch you, like set him alight, right?" So he's got fire bombs ready to go with rioters coming at his shop that he's built up over a lifetime. Everything he's got is in that shop. His whole life is that shop, right? His living is that shop. It's his property, right? And the rioters are coming at him. Well, so the police decided to charge him under the Terrorism Act for manufacturing explosive devices, right? Well, it went to the High Court, and the High Court said, no, you can't do that. In the circumstance, he has the right, under the English Bill of Rights, to use a weapon in self-defence. And because he made an explosive device for a specific purpose, when there was the rule of law had gone, right? There was no policeman there to back him up. He had to protect his property and his rights, and that's exactly what he did. So the court found in his favour, High Court, right, and said in that circumstance. But they made a proviso. They said this, right, and this is, I'm only talking about petrol bombs here, right? What they said was, if outside of a riot situation he had manufactured petrol bombs, we would hear this in a different way. We're not saying we would come out with a different answer, but it would be a different set of circumstances, right? Where we would look and say, well, so why did you make the petrol bombs? Because if you make a petrol bomb, like if you go to Norway, you can make bombs in Norway, right? And blow them up. You can go out and blow them up and have fun, do all sorts of strange things in Norway, right? You can't do it here, right? You used to be able to do it here. But if you blow yourself up, it's life, isn't it? If you want to have fun, have fun. You can do dangerous things in life. You can go skydiving if you want. Your parachute may not open, right? You've got to, but it's when you put other people at serious risk, and there needs to be some limitation to what you're doing. And even in America, they do that. In some circumstances, there's certain things that you can and cannot do. But overall, they're just pushing us.
Which actually sort of leads me to the assisted murder bill, also known as the assisted dying bill officially, right? Which I think is horrific, where the state gets to say will actually have the choice of life and death over people that are innocent. For whatever reason, it's just humane.
It's against God's law. It's against God's law. It's completely unlawful.
And which article of which constitutional act does it violate?
It violates God's law. So one of the things that you need to understand about the law, by the way, I mean, most people don't even know. They don't know this, right? Originally, and I think it may even still be the case, there isn't actually an act of Parliament that forbids murder. Murder has always been what's known as a common law criminal offence, or a common law offence, right? So a common law offence means the common law is God's law, and God's law is common law, right? That's already been said by many Lord Chief Justices. They've got whole rulings on it, right? So what I'm saying is, suicide is a sin, right? So once you understand suicide is a sin, why are you legislating for a sin? That's what you're doing, and that's illegal.
Okay, all right. Now, I can get God's law as a natural law, right? But what I don't understand is well, how come that's within the lawful legal system? Because is it to do with the Bible? Were decisions made from the Bible or something? Is that codified?
The Ten Commandments is the basis of our legal system. The Ten Commandments is the basis of our legal system. right? Uh, in the common law, there's a saying: "No loss, no harm, no injury, no fraud." That's the basis of our system, right? And it doesn't need to be written. It was a moral code. And again, there's a difference between moral and legal, right? Just to give you an example, you can tell a police officer to F off in public. It is not a criminal offence. Never has been. And there's a High Court ruling on that, right? It's not a criminal offence. And then the judge said it may be immoral to swear in public, but it is not criminal to swear in public.
Okay.
So there's the difference, and people need to understand that. But we have moral decline because they have moved away from us being a Christian nation. And I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, right? I believe that this nation should be non-secular, right? That means a Christian nation, whether you like it or not, right? If you want to be a Muslim and practice Sharia or introduce Sharia, then there are plenty of places in the world that you can do that. You don't have to be here, right? And to be fair, it's a bit like the way the country's going at the moment. People have kept saying to me, "Come to America, Graham, come to America, Graham, come to America. We are a Christian nation." And they are. I've been there many times, right? And I love the United States of America and its people, right? If America then suddenly says, and they should really, we are a non-secular nation. We are a Christian nation, whether you like it or not, right? But we're not going to wage war on people, right? We're a Christian nation. Then I would have to think about leaving this country if it carries on being secular, because it's obvious what's going to happen, and England's going to be lost forever.
Well, I think the importance of Christianity or Islam or Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism or whatever is that it gives a moral anchor, a code of morality for society to organize itself by. And in Britain, in England, here, it's grown up out of the Christian ethos. Now, I want to go back to the thing about swearing at a police officer, because there was the recent tragic incident of a guy who was apparently abusive at a demonstration in August around the whole Southport murders, right? Terrible, terrible incident. And then he was in prison for 3 years and he killed himself. And there were other people who were imprisoned for posting hurty words on the internet. So what happened there, and where are their rights enshrined, and how come their rights were violated, and where are they protected?
Listen, you have hit the nail on the head, and the problem is, people are not. The system is corrupt to the core, right? So that I always say to people, especially the ones who speak to me, sack your solicitor, sack your barrister. The only way I can help you as a paralegal in any form of court, because they won't give me right of audience, right? Some judges do. I have been given right of audience in the High Court. And I have read law for 30 years. I may be a layperson, but I'm a common lawyer, right? I respect the legal system. I don't respect the corruption of the legal system, right? And because I speak about that, they don't like it, right? So what happened in them circumstances is the solicitors told them to plead guilty, right? What did we say earlier on? Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Go in front of a jury of your peers and you will get a not guilty, right? None of them people would have been sent down, but instead they listened to so-called legal professionals who are corrupt to the core. The solicitors are corrupt, and if you want to know, I can tell you cases currently where solicitors have taken one group of solicitors. The oldest solicitors firm in England was taken over, unfortunately, by a group of Muslims, Pakistani Muslims, as solicitors. And guess what they did? They stole everything in the client account, £70 million. Right? No one talks about it, right? And then what happened was the Solicitors Regulation Authority then put a claim out on all the other solicitors and said, you've all got to cough up 10 grand, right, to pay back the clients, right? And they're all refusing to do it and getting the and all sorts of stuff, right? But they're not talking about this, right? So what I'm saying is solicitors are corrupt, right? The majority of them, because they certainly don't represent the law. And by the way, they don't take an oath. Right, they make a declaration, and there's a difference between an oath and a declaration in English law. Then you've got the barristers, right? The barristers have not been trained It's been removed in the early 1970s from bar exams training English constitutional law. So the only people that actually understand the English constitution now are lay people like me, right?
Okay.
And then they won't let us speak in court. So it means
we need to educate ourselves. So what is the protection that we have in?
So the only protection, really, I mean, there are protections. The only real protection, and they're about to remove it, is a jury, and representing yourself, and then educating yourself on your rights, which is what I do with the English Constitution seminars. We have now got 3 courses that we're setting up. One is your rights, so this is a basic course, right? And it tells you exactly and how to present it, right? And again, we'll get back to them guys being arrested. And I'll talk you through the process. The second is what we call the intermediate course, which is we are training Mackenzie friends to represent people and help represent people in any court function, right? And the last is the one that empowers solicitors and barristers that are honourable. There's not many of them, but there are some, right, that want to be trained on the English Constitution, not from a British concept of Marxism, but the English. And these are your rights, and this is the history of our law, and this is still law, and present it with confidence and persuasion to a High Court judge or to any judge in a Crown Court if it's a criminal offence. So getting back to that situation with them people, what happens when you're arrested? And we can go into citizens' rights here, right? What happens when you're arrested? You say no comment. Because what they say to you, and they changed the caution, and they shouldn't have done because that was unlawful. You have the right to remain silent. I don't care what their statutes tell you. You have the God-given right to remain silent against the state who are trying to prosecute you and take your liberty. You have the right to remain silent, so you don't say anything. As soon as you open your mouth, you're putting yourself in a prison cell, right? The police are not there to help you. They are there to prosecute you. No other reason, right? They used to be peacekeepers. They are no longer peacekeepers, right? They're not there to keep the king's peace now. They are there to enforce Parliament statutes. That is not their original function, right? People need to understand that when you don't have a solicitor, you don't have a barrister. You don't say anything. It'll get to the interview stage. They'll say to you, Mr. Moore, we believe under this circumstance, and they'll ask you a question. And you say, no comment, right? And they'll go all through a series of questions. You say, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, right? Then they'll say to you, do you want a cup of tea, Graham? You say, no comment. Because if you answer yes to you want a cup of tea, they will ask the crooked judge, he's answered one of our questions, now we want to put the whole set of questions to the jury, right? And then you said no comment, and they try and incriminate you by then reading out all their questions and putting their questions to the jury, right? Even though you said no comment, right? And because the reason the judge will allow it is because you answered yes to a cup of tea, right? You say no comment to everything. You don't even give in your name and the date of birth. And I'm talking about this is once you're being processed. Right? It's really important to understand this because they've changed the law yet again, and they shouldn't have done, right? Which is that if you don't give us your name and address when we ask you, then you're committing a criminal offence and we can arrest you for that. That is true under certain circumstances. And the circumstances is they must believe that you've committed a crime and seen that crime being committed, or have a statement from someone to say that you've committed that crime. It's arresting you under a general warrant. Right? There are certain conditions that must be met before they can ask for your name and address, right? And if they don't meet them conditions, they have no right to ask your name and address, right? And this is crucially important. A police constable isn't a police constable because they're dressed in a uniform, right? It's because they have a warrant card. And the warrant card gives them authority to arrest you, right? Under the general warrant, if someone has made a statement to them that you have committed an offence, and then they must assess it because that's as we spoke about before, that's whether there is any offence committed. It's an assessment that they can make. But people need to understand, even me, right? So a police officer comes up to me, right, and he says to me, "What's your name?" I'll say, "Why?" Well, I want to know your name. Well, why do you want to know my name? Well, because I'm a policeman. So what? right? And they go, and I say, so the first thing I ask them is, show me your warrant card, right? And they say, and I've had blue flashing lights behind me on a motorway before, right? 2 coppers standing there, right? And I said, that doesn't mean you're a policeman. What makes you a police constable is your warrant card, right? Show me your warrant card. And if they've come out without it, they've got no authority to stop you, right? And people don't understand that. They've got no authority to stop you. If they haven't got a warrant card, right, on them, because that's what gives them their right, and they must see you committing a criminal offence to do it, right? Civil offences they shouldn't be involved with. It's illegal, right?
Right. Okay. So let's say they have got a warrant card, and you don't have to give your name and address unless someone's given a statement that you've committed a crime or they've seen you commit a crime.
Right.
But let's say for whatever reason you end up in the police station, and you don't have to give your name and address there either. You can just stay silent, right? Can you just say no comment, or just do this, or just say you're not answerable?
You don't have to answer. You can.
You don't even have to say.
So just to make sure you're aware of this, there have been occasions with me, right, where I've had female police officers. Just an example, right, and I don't say anything. All I do is stare at their chest. I make them feel as uncomfortable as making me feel, right? Stare at their chest. That's it, right? Don't say anything, and then they'll terminate the interview. That's it, right? And they may turn around and say, the whole interview you stared at my chest, and the judge just giggled to himself, you know, my God, I would have stared at your chest, you know. It's just one of the things, because it's psychological. That's the whole point. And by the way, the reason why you say no comment is because they haven't charged you with anything, and they've got a whole history of laws that they can charge you with. Even if you open your mouth, there is something they can charge you with. Don't say anything. And then when you get in front of court, you have the right to remain silent. In the dock, you ain't even got to represent yourself. You can shut up, right, and just sit there. And all you want to say is, if it's indictable, right, is an indictable offence or triable either way, you must request a jury. And you sit there. It is the prosecution's job to prosecute you and prove the case against you. And if there is no evidence, even the judge has to step in and say to the jury, there's no evidence here that this man's done anything or this woman's done anything wrong, right? They haven't proved their case, right? But in reality, you want to defend yourself, but you must do it under common law, right? So you use what's known as a common law defence. This is crucial, and a lot of these people get it wrong. You want to use every weapon in your arsenal, which is right, common law defence, and you want to use statutory defence. And then what you do is you work out what your defence is in law. And you present that to the jury. That's it, and never incriminate yourself in that court, because otherwise you're doing the job of the prosecution.
Right. Okay. And does that mean entering a plea? Do you have to enter a plea, or can you?
So if you don't enter a plea, a judge will enter a plea for you, which is guilty. He can't enter a plea of guilty. It's illegal. So a judge will enter a plea for you. You ain't got to say anything in court, and the judge will say, "We'll take that as a plea of not guilty."
Right. Okay.
So that's fairly recent in our laws, but that is the answer. So getting back to them people, they rely on the fact that most people are law abiding, and we used to live in what's known as high trust society. So you're trusting legal professionals who are only there to stitch you up. They get paid whatever happens. All of them solicitors and barristers that stitch them people up and put them in prison. If they had contacted me, and again, they don't. They won't. I've had many cases thrown out and convictions quashed, right? And it depends on the judge as well. I mean, one of the judges in Leeds, I can't remember what his actually name was, but for example, his wife was a Conservative mayor, right? And he had to declare that his wife was during this case, had to declare that, and he said, "Do you want me to recuse myself?" And I said, "No," right? Because the case happened to be against the mayor of Liverpool, who had lied and got a lady convicted for a complete load of nonsense. And once we went through it all and explained it to this High Court judge, he was a circuit judge, he got it straight away. And he was being honest. And he actually said to me, I'm very grateful for everything that you presented. He said, did you do this case stated and the legal work? I said, yeah. And he said, well, most of it is all good law, and I'm very grateful for your assistance. I said, no problem, Your Honour. Right. So we're respectful, we're not nasty, we love the law, right? So my point is, they won't pay me for that, right? Because because they've got a monopoly. And we need to go back to the old system, the English
common lawyers, right? But Greg,
lawyers. And you pay me because I represent people. So just to give people, I don't like Tommy Robinson, right? And I especially don't like him since he come out with a crack or live video on YouTube where he said, if you don't support Israel, you are a jihadist. I don't support Israel, and I am not a jihadist. Trust me, right? Yeah. But when he said that, I was like, I ain't having that. I ain't having that. You're conning people. That is a nonsense thing to say, right? And again, if you want to get back to the Acts of Union, if you void the Acts of Union, you void. It must be void, not repeal. You void the Balfour Agreement. You void the Palestinian mandate of 1923. All of it is void. The actual separation and what was created by the British, right, in that area is completely gone. You give the Levant back to the people of the Levant, and the real Jews and the real Muslims and the real Christians, right, live together in peace and harmony without the interference of the British, right? That is what would happen if you void the Acts of Union, which is why certain groups of people control this nation and control the English in stopping independence, because they know what it means. It means there will be no Israel, right? It's gone. In law, it's gone, right? And all I try and do is explain that to people, right? We're not interested in the Middle East, right? We want to go back to being England. We are a colony of the British, right? And we need to be set free, and the world will live in peace again, right? That's all people have got to understand. So all of this law is valid, right?
Yes.
And it can be very, very internationally powerful if you use it correctly.
Yes. No, okay, great. I'm gonna have links to your party and everything in your X account, and people can follow you and find out about the events and the seminars that you speak at and everything, and get involved. I want to ask you, the last thing I think is about the freedom of speech, because in the Bill of Rights it says, I can't remember the exact wording, you probably can, right? There shall be no limits on speech.
Right. It's
whether it's for MPs or everybody.
Right. It is misinterpreted by the British to say that it is only for Parliament. It is not only for Parliament. Freedom of speech comes from the petition rights, right? And the petition rights come
1627 rights of petition.
The rights of petition come from 1629.
Right. Okay.
So pre-existing anything, it's part of our constitution. But if you knew the history of the petition rights, and by the way, petition doesn't mean writing down your name on a bit of paper, right?
Yeah.
Petition means if you need to look the word up legally from that era, right? So the 1600s, what did petition mean? It meant making a demand of your superiors. That's what it means. And you can do that in various ways. So giving you an example of freedom of petition, which is also in the Bill of Rights. I petitioned Her Majesty the Queen outside Buckingham Palace. 30 police officers turned up and tried to and did arrest me, right? It's all on video, by the way, and the discussions we was having about the Constitution. They arrested me, handcuffed me, threw me in the back of a van, kept me in custody, and then prosecuted me, right? For petitioning the monarch.
Okay, what were you actually doing? If I'd been a bystander, what would I have seen you doing?
You would have seen me standing there talking in front of Buckingham Palace saying, we demand X, Y, Z. So on the petition at the time, I was saying...
For that you were arrested.
Blah, 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 of the monarch, right? So all of our supporters was there. There was loads of Americans there cheering us on because we was talking about Constitution and the Constitution being fully enforced, which was part of the petition. The police arrest me, right? We go to the #1 court in Westminster, magistrates, right? And 100 of our people come in and sit in a gallery, right? They called the riot squad. And we've all got rule of law t-shirts on, English Bill of Rights t-shirts, Magna Carta t-shirts, right? The guy leading the riot squad said, what's all this about? And I said, well, I never called you, right? It's idiocy, right? And they all just stood outside having cups of coffee and said, let them get on with it. It's a court case, right? So the basis of it is, the judge said, what do you rely on in your defence, Mr. Moore? And I held up the English Bill of Rights in full, printed out, and the Coronation Oath Act in full, printed out. And I said, I have a constitutional right to petition my monarch. He said, okay. He looked at the CPS and he said, is there any camera evidence to support your position that he has committed a criminal offence and why he's in this court, right? And she said, no, sir. So he said, you're telling me there's not one of the 30 police officers, including the chief superintendent, 2 inspectors, 4 sergeants, and all these police constables, not one of their cameras was switched on. She went, no, sir. Right? He said, how about statements? If we've got a statement from any of the police officers to prove what their case is. And she said, no, there's not a single statement from any of the police officers, sir. Right? So we said, so what are you going to do then? Right? And she went, we offer no evidence. And he looked at me and said, Mr. Moore, you are free to leave. Right? And the whole gallery erupted and cheered. Right? And he said, the judge shouted at him, this is not a pantomime. And one of my supporters shouted back, oh, yes, it is. Right? And the judge started laughing, right? And he said, Mr. Moore, how much has it cost you to bring your 5 witnesses and who's actually going to give evidence and yourself to court? I said, £350. He said to the prosecution, pay the man, right? You need to pay him before he goes. Write him a cheque, right? And he said, so I am authorising you giving him the 350 quid. Now, the point of all of that, right, is why did that happen? And part of the process was, it was an abusive process. I could have sued the police and done various other things, right? But the process of suing is so convoluted. It takes so much time up, and it's an abusive process in its own right. They try and stop you getting to the common law and the torts and the civil law, right? So just to make sure everyone's aware of this, right? The Bill of Rights clearly states that it is your right to petition the monarch, and using commitments against you and prosecuting you for such petitions is illegal. It says that in the Bill of Rights, right? So every one of them police officers, including the chief superintendent, were bullying me, and they were in effect committing an offence themselves, right, of contempt of statute and contempt of sovereign, right? Criminal offences, which meant that each one of them officers had perjured their oaths, which meant their warrant card should have been taken and every one of them lost their pensions. But the system is not being applied as it should be. If it was, you wouldn't see all this, because most people don't know that if I went through the pensions of police constables, which is in effect a bribe, right, to ensure that they are corrupt for the state, most, when I say most, at high level, so police constables get £500,000 cash in their back pocket, untaxable, when they retire as a cash lump sum, and in 270 grand a year, right? And people wonder, right? And then as you go down the ranks, it only reduces fractionally. A police constable now gets anywhere between 90 and 130 grand cash in their back pocket, untaxable, when they retire. And then they get a 2/3 pension, right? And you're wondering why those police officers stick together, right? Because they will protect the state, the communist system that's given them that money. The police in this country are now, they should be renamed. They are not the police. They are the Red Guard. And the Red Guard are the people that enforce the communist regime on the people of Russia, Poland, and all these other countries. And when people realise what's actually going on, right?
Okay.
It is
Graham, that is fascinating and amazing. Right now, I want to go back. And then I think we need to finish up to the right of petition and the freedom of speech. So that's okay that I can petition the monarch, but in terms of people talking, you know, for me as a vlogger, for you as a vlogger, for people writing material, presenting material, where is their freedom of speech protected? If at all.
It's protected. It's protected under the Constitution of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, especially the journalist aspect of it. It's all protected.
Where's the specific reference?
So there is, and I'd have to go. For me to go through that is a whole new show on its own.
Right.
But each right that you've got in the common law and in statute and constitutional law is a big expansion, right? That's why it's very. That's why there's 3 stages of our, if you want to call it our instruction, right? And a lot of this is what's known as time immemorial, right? It's a legal term. It means beyond living memory, right? In other words, it's a customary right, and customary rights are supported by our courts. So people, the reason why the English Constitution is so fantastic is because it is a common law constitution. It is not codified in the same way as the American Constitution. It was at one stage during Cromwell's time, it was codified, but codification of constitution is not the best way of doing it. The best way of doing it is the common law system, because you can, by the way, make sure I'm getting this right. I don't want anyone to think that you can take any of these rights away. You can't. Officially, you can't. They've been doing it, but it's wrong in law. You can add to someone
inalienable. They're inalienable rights.
So they're God-given rights. You can add to someone's rights, but you can't take away from them. So as we progress through history, now we're coming into the digital age. We're looking at AI. If you go and look at our website, you'll see there's a digital Bill of Rights that we have written as constitutionalists, which is the same type of thing as the constitutionalists did during the Glorious Revolution, and it protects you. Right. So one of the protections we put in is you can't have central bank digital currency. Right. I happen to be a system engineer. Right. So trust me, I understand technology. Right. And systems don't have to have digital. It doesn't have to be all digital. Oh. By the way, that all comes from the British and the Israelis. Right. Yeah. People don't know that. Digital Five Nations, the inauguration of that whole thing was in 2014 in London. Right, everything that you're seeing now with digital banking currency, right, it comes from that essence. It's the Israelis and the British, Estonians, etc. It is a control mechanism, right? So when you start talking about crypto, it is a form of payment, right? It should never be. You should never put yourself in position. It's the only form of payment, right? Yep. The same as, you know, I've got physical gold, right? Because if the lights go out, how are you going to claim or get to your crypto? You can't, right? Yeah. But as a method of transferring funds, of doing certain things, and people think it's not recorded, it is recorded. There are ways now with encryption that you can stop it, but that's just one of the control mechanisms. I'm only bringing that up because a lot of so on our political side, we believe in having cryptocurrency. We haven't got a problem with cryptocurrency. What we've got a problem with is central bank having control over it, right? No one should control that, right? So it is a method of payment, and it's moved with the times. AI is inevitable, right? It's who controls AI and what it is allowed to do in law, right? And if it is completely unregulated, the bad guys will get hold of it and control you, right? So there's lots of different things that people need to understand. But we as a political party, as constitutionalists, right? So a constitutionalist simply believes in the rule of law and being non-political and having the vision to give our future generations half a chance of not being enslaved, right? Which is what the founders of England and our great ancestors gave us in constitutional and common law.
Yeah, Graham. Bloody hell. Thank you so much. Now, I'll have the links again. You do these in-person events,
yeah,
right, all around the country.
Yeah.
Okay, and if people want to find out, are they listed on your website, or do they need to register?
So we're booking up now for this year. Again, I've got one coming up next week, next Thursday. I'll try and make them on a Sunday so more people can attend to them. We ask for a donation, which it's not for a political party, it's for the Constitution Society, which helps us then get out there, because you've got to pay petrol, hotels, and different things. So we ask for a donation of £10, right? It's only about the Constitution. You can come to either website, the EnglishConstitutionParty.com, and find our email address, or you can email if you go to the English Constitution Party, you'll see the emails on there. But remember, we're all volunteers. No one gets paid for this as such, right? It's all about, just about covering our costs. But for what we do, it's such a vital job. And we educate, just to make sure people are aware. The English constitutional seminars, right? I literally have the banners of all these laws and show you the law books where it is written. I show you the proof. I evidence it, right? And then people go, wow, right? So we try. You can't get 1100 years worth of law and legal history, right, into an hour. But we make them about an hour to an hour and a half. And I'm telling you now, the questions and answers are also recorded, right? And that's where the audience interact. That's the bit I love, right? Because people are asking me sincere, honest questions. And I always say to people, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Only intelligent people ask questions, right? And then the questions come out. And then I have to think all the time of how I would place that and reverse it back into whether it's constitutional or unconstitutional, right? And again, I mean, the last one I had went on for 6 hours non-stop of me speaking live to an audience, right? But the interaction with the audience are fantastic, right? And then so there was 2 hours of the seminar. There was 2 hours of questions and answers. Then they started getting into some of the questions where I went, hang on a minute, I don't want to be on camera talking about this, right? So they went, turn the camera off. So we turn the camera off, and then they go, right, what can we do? And I go, bing, 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 bing. That's constitutional. But if I start to put that out there, they will lock me up, even though what I'm talking about is completely constitutional, completely legal, but they don't like people knowing, right? So then the people are coming out and saying, so there is a way out of this. And you say, of course there is. There's always a legal route out of anything if you apply and enforce the law in the way that it was intended. The problem is we've got a crooked judiciary, crooked enforcement, including the police. You've only got to look. I mean, there was 2,000, up now, 2,000 deaths in police custody. Mainly in England and Wales. Not a single police officer has been done for torture, and they should have been. So when you start looking at our laws and what's not being enforced, they don't even get a slap. They can kill you in custody and not even get a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, well, we know they're not enforcing the laws about the slaughter in the Middle East and Ukraine and the people they're bombing in Yemen.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, so absolutely. And the British Empire has a long and ignoble tradition and legacy of killing millions.
I agree. And again, people say to me all the time, you're a lefty because you support Palestine. I said, I don't support Palestine or Israel. I support the children. I support the normal, everyday victims of war. That's what I support. In law, right, what is going on is unlawful, illegal. It is a genocide against the people and against the children. And what I'm saying is there is an answer to it. And again, the English have been vilified by the British, right? We are the good people. We are the ones who set the slaves free. And when people understand the real history and not the corrupted history that has been presented to them, they will stand up and say, Saint, I'm with you 100%. So again, reference Islam. I don't like Sharia, but then again, I don't like Jesuits either.
Yeah, and you didn't like you don't want the English Constitution doesn't allow for
correct
a religious doctrinaire legal system. Now,
exactly.
I do want to finish up, Graham. So so people can go into the website, they can register, join the party if they wish, and also follow you on X and your Rumble channel because you do, I think, broadcast every single weekday.
So I've done Mondays to Fridays every night, 8 o'clock, talking about the English Constitution, English history, and geopolitics where necessary. And I've done it for a minimum of 10 years. I've studied the Constitution for 30 years, and there's a whole history of why I got into that as well. And when people find out, and again, just to make sure everyone knows, I died when I was 24, not near-death experience. I actually died. I've crossed over to the other side, and I see my mum and spoke to my mum who died a year before, right? It changed everything, and including, because I had a serious brain injury, both sides of my brain started to work when I come out of the coma. And it completely changed the way I looked at life. I had a completely different perception of life and how we should live together in peace and harmony.
Absolutely, absolutely. Graham, thank you so much. It's been a joy and a pleasure and an education. Really, really appreciate it. I'll have the links to your stuff. Please share this video. We have to get educated about our inalienable rights and then start demanding and enforcing their application. So thank you from me and thank you from Graham and bye-bye. And between now and when I see you next, please keep filling your pockets with constitutional rights. This is Graham and Rich signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.